The New York Mets need to sign Kyle Tucker.
If Alonso's not there, I think you got to go and try and get Tucker because he's a better offensive player. He's a difference maker offensively.
Kyle Tucker's whatever he wants to be, man. You want a stolen base? You want defense? You want the most homers?
You know how every offseason, there's that one move that nobody sees coming until it's right in front of our faces. The kind of signing that makes you sit back and think, wait, how did we not see this happening? Because Kyle Tucker to the New York Mets might give us that exact moment. Just a few days ago, before Thanksgiving, the Mets made a move that had their entire fan base absolutely stunned. I'm talking about the Brandon Nimmo trade that sent their longest tenured player, a guy who was supposed to be a Met for life on that 8-year, $162 million contract, to the Texas Rangers for Marcus Semien. Now, on the surface, you might be thinking this is just another veteran for veteran swap. Two teams shuffling deck chairs, trying to change their luck after disappointing seasons. But David Stearns, the Mets president of baseball operations, came out and said they were prioritizing defense and run prevention.
Our defense wasn't good enough, and that certainly contributed to our pitching challenges.
Marcus Semien is a Gold Glove second baseman, sure, but he's also 35 years old and coming off his worst offensive season since 2018. Posting a 97 OPS plus in 2025. Meanwhile, Nimmo just hit a career high 25 home runs. So if this move was purely about defense, okay, I can buy that. But then why create this massive hole in your outfield? Why trade away a productive bat without having a clear replacement lined up? Unless you already know who that replacement is going to be. Now, before we get into the video today, guys, again, thank you so much on our road to 50,000 subscribers. Appreciating all the support. If you're not already, please subscribe and turn on those notifications. If you are, then we're giving away a jersey every single upload to a lucky winner. This upload's winner is at Manuel CRDZ. Appreciate you, bro. Reach out and I got you. Now that that's out of the way, let's get right into it. John Heyman floated this idea almost immediately after the trade rumors started flying, suggesting that moving Nimmo could serve as an indicator that the Mets plan to pursue Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger, both of whom are free agents. And when you really think about it, that's the only move that makes sense here. The Mets created an opening in their outfield for a reason, and that reason is because Uncle Steve Cohen is about to offer a bag to somebody in free agency, and that is the only logical solution here. So why would Tucker choose the Mets? Well, first, there's the money situation. The Mets just shed Brandon Nimmo's contract, saving themselves money down the road, even while taking on Semien's deal. And let's be real, Steve Cohen's pockets are basically limitless. This is a man who spent $765 million on one player last year. You think he's going to scoff at $400 million for Kyle Tucker? I don't think so. I'd even go as far as to say that Stephen Cohen is probably more adamant on adding Kyle Tucker than David Stearns is. Second, there's the competitive situation. The Mets, despite their late season collapse in 2025, have Juan Soto locked in for the next 15 years. They've got Francisco Lindor, who's still one of the best shortstops in baseball. They've got a young core of position players in Mark Vientos and others. The rotation needs work, absolutely, but that's fixable, especially with Cohen's money. And here's the kicker. The NL East is way more winnable than the AL East right now. You're competing against the Braves, who have their own issues, the Phillies, who are aging, and the Marlins and Nationals, who are just in a rebuilding phase. So that's the path to the playoffs that Tucker has to be thinking about right now. Now, I know it's easy to sit there and make fun of the Mets for missing the playoffs. I know I've definitely done my fair share of jokes, but the fact of the matter is that the Mets have a solid core and an ownership willing to spend to win now. That is a recipe for success. But before we go any further, let's address the elephant in the room, Pete Alonso. The polar bear opted out of his contract after the season, and all signs are pointing towards him testing free agency for real this time. Last winter, Alonso's market dried up and he came back to the Mets on a 2-year deal with an opt-out. This winter, he's coming off a much better season, but the market still might not be there for the massive long-term deal that he wants. First basemen, especially right-handed ones with defensive limitations, just don't command the money they used to in today's game. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say is that right now, the Red Sox are the favorites to sign Alonso, not the Mets. So if Alonso does walk, the Mets suddenly have a massive hole in the middle of their order, specifically a right-handed power hitter sized hole. And who's the best power hitter bat available on the free agent market right now? Kyle Tucker. While Tucker bats lefty, but he still does provide that middle of the order thump that the Mets will need if Alonso leaves. This isn't just about replacing Nimmo in the outfield. It's about replacing both Nimmo and potentially Alonso with one elite player who does everything at an elite level. I mean, seriously, Tucker even stole 25 bags last year. He is the definition of a five-tool player. So to me, the fit is almost too perfect when you really think about it. Tucker slots into right field, allowing Juan Soto to move around between right field and DH, depending on matchups and Soto's health. Jeff McNeil can play center field, or the Mets can explore their prospect Carson Bench for that spot. The lineup would look something like Lindor leading off, Tucker in the two-hole, Soto third, and then Vientos, and others filling out the rest. That's the type of lineup that can compete against any other team in Major League Baseball. Now, defensively, Tucker's metrics did take a slight dip in 2025, posting a -2 OAA, but that's largely explained by the hand injury he was playing through. When healthy, Tucker has been a plus defender in right field throughout his career. He's got the arm, he's got the range, and more importantly, he's still 28 years old. The defensive decline that you worry about with a 33-year-old Brandon Nimmo, that's not a concern with Tucker for at least another 4 or 5 years. And if we're being honest, that's probably when Steve Cohen will be looking to replace him with another shiny new player anyways. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but the Mets need pitching. Why would they spend $400 million on an outfielder when their rotation is a mess? And this is a totally valid thing to say, but here's the thing. Stephen Cohen can afford to do both. The Mets can sign Tucker and still go after a frontline starter. They can trade for someone like Freddie Peralta or pursue Framber Valdez in free agency. Unlike other owners who might use their wallet as an excuse not to be aggressive. Cohen's wallet doesn't have a limit that forces those kinds of either-or decisions. I think the Mets have the farm system to go out and get a guy like Freddie Peralta, Joe Ryan, or even a young controllable arm like Cole Reagans. Now, I do think it's important to know that any pursuit of Kyle Tucker by the Mets will not inhibit their pursuit of pitching, because if it did, then this is obviously a bad idea. But just imagine if they did both. Think about the message that signing Kyle Tucker and getting an impact player would send to the rest of Major League Baseball. Last year, the Mets got Juan Soto and still missed the playoffs. This year, they're coming back with Soto, adding Tucker potentially, improving their defense with Semien, and potentially upgrading their pitching. That's a team that's going all in, and that's a team that can definitely win. But what if Kyle Tucker doesn't choose the Mets? What then? Well, in that case, I'd expect them to go after Cody Bellinger very heavily. And seeing as the Yankees are committing $22 million to Trent Grisham due to him accepting the qualifying offer, I'd say the Mets have a better chance at landing Belly than their crosstown rivals. But remember that only if Kyle Tucker doesn't want to go to Queens. It says a lot about the franchise that their plan B is 90% of other teams' plan A. Now, don't get me wrong, the Mets need this. They cannot afford another season of coming up short. Not after the way 2025 ended. They cannot afford to let Peter Alonso walk, trade Brandon Nimmo, and then not have a big move to show for it. The fan base, which has been extremely patient and supportive, even through tough times, needs something to get excited about. And signing Kyle Tucker does that. It shows that the Mets are serious about rebounding next season. It shows that they learned from their mistakes. But I'll be honest, maybe I'm being way too positive. Let's just say the Mets in Kyle Tucker and add a pitcher or two in the offseason. Great. That means the Mets just spent $1.5 billion in the last 2 off seasons. That's a lot for a team that missed the playoffs in 2025. Now, I don't think it's likely, but there is a chance that this will all come back to bite the Mets and Steve Cohen in all the wrong ways. Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, and Francisco Lindor are all great players. I know Soto and Tucker are young, but nobody knows what can happen in the future. They could regress, get injured, demand a trade, literally anything. Is it really that wise to invest over $1 billion in just 2 players? I know the Dodgers did it, and well, look at them now. But they're the exception, not the rule. But like I said, that's only if everything goes wrong for the Mets. Now, I'm not saying Tucker to the Mets is a done deal. In fact, I'd say there isn't any concrete deal in place at all. Tucker hasn't made his final decision, and there are still plenty of teams in the mix. But when you connect all of the dots, when you look at the Nimmo trade through the lens of what comes next, when you consider Steve Cohen's track record and the Mets' desperate need for an impact outfielder, it all points in one direction, and that is Kyle Tucker. Now, I personally believe the Mets' biggest competitors for Kyle Tucker are the Toronto Blue Jays. The Jays have already proven they really don't care about overpaying players, seeing as they gave Dylan Cease $210 million. But more importantly, they understand one key thing. Their championship window is open. It's time to capitalize on it. If that means giving Kyle Tucker an extra $50 million, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Toronto outbid the Mets for Kyle Tucker. But remember, that is purely speculation. The Mets are laying the groundwork for something big here. They've created the roster space, they've created the financial flexibility, and most importantly, they've created the urgency. All that's left is for Steve Cohen to do what he does best, write a check that nobody else is willing to write. The question isn't whether the Mets will make Tucker the offer he can't refuse. The question is whether Tucker is ready to become the next great Met. Now, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Am I reaching here, or is there a real possibility of Tucker going to the Mets? If not, where do you guys think he lands? That's all for today. I'll see you on the next one.